pianist Graham Fitch has played concerts all around the world to great critical acclaim. He was head of keyboards and professor of piano at the University of Cape Town for many years and is in great demand as a teacher and adjudicator. So I'm delighted that he's taken the time to join me today for one of my classical conversations here at Steinway Hall. Welcome.
Thanks, Melanie.
Lovely to be here with you.
Thank you.
I'm going to start straight away by talking all about your musical education.
Okay.
How old were you when you started to play? What was the catalyst? And do you come from a musical family?
I don't come from a musical family. I'm geriatric by most people's standards. I didn't start till I was 12 and a half, 13, which is quite old
yes.
to be doing what I'm doing now. But I think when I look back, I always had this burning desire to play the piano, even though we didn't have a piano in the house. I just had access to pianos I think my grandfather had something that resembled a piano, but it was horrifically out of tune and dilapidated. But it didn't stop me from going there every time we went and just spending hours with also neighbours who had pianos. So
right.
I had this burning desire, but we didn't have a piano at home and it just wasn't thought about. Lessons just weren't thought about in those days, certainly not as far as I was concerned. So the way I started, actually told a little fib at school. The schoolmaster said, hands up those boys who play a musical instrument, because my hand shot up because I was absolutely wanted to be, deep down wanted to be a musician. And he asked me what instrument I played and I said the piano. And I'll never forget that sinking feeling I got in my stomach when he handed me a piece of music to play in the end of term concert. Of course I didn't read music, I didn't know anything really, so I had to get somebody to record it for me, and then I just listened to it over and over and over until I could play it by ear, which is what I did. I remember taking the page, it was only one page, putting it on the grand piano in the school hall, pretending to read it, but actually was playing by ear.
That's a very good thing to be able to do, though, isn't it?
I think it's a very, very good thing.
Very
to be able
important.
To do. Well, certainly for a musician to be able to use their ear is vital. So that's how I started, but the lady who sort of recorded it for me came up and said, this boy needs to have lessons. So she was my very first teacher for a year and a bit.
Amazing.
Still no piano at home, so I'd have a sort of a lesson. It wasn't really a lesson, but a kind of a piano experience with this lady every day after school, until she felt that she couldn't do anything more. Then I went to a proper piano teacher.
So which teacher then do you think was crucial in your development as a pianist?
Oh, that's such a tricky one, because I don't think there's any one that I can single out and say this one, because by saying this one's crucial, I'm saying this one is peripheral. And I see teachers as being, each one of them has something to contribute to my upbringing, my musical upbringing.
Yes.
They were all important. I mean, just to give you a little perspective here, my very first professor at the Royal College of Music was Stephen Savage. Fantastic teacher of piano, fantastic musician, hugely energetic lessons, very skillful piano teacher, and he would talk a lot about not just the music, but actually how one achieves how to play, really. Technique, yes. If you want to put it in a narrow kind of frame. After that, I went to Peter Valfish, who didn't once talk about piano playing, wasn't interested in piano playing, and yet it was as a result of having gone from Stephen to Peter, that was when I won the Hopkinson gold medal at the RCM. That's
interesting.
And I think it was because Peter didn't talk about, and my mind is very attuned to, how we manage things, because I've got a teacher's mind. I'm always analysing things, that's not working because of this, or Peter, by not talking about that, can I give you an example
of
a lesson that I had with him? Opus 109 Beethoven. Right now, I was a student and I was learning the piece, it wasn't a polished performance by any means. So I went for one of my mammoth 3-hour lessons with him. And I don't think it could have been that good, really, my playing of it, because it was a week or two old. So I took the thing to him. And I had one of those experiences walking down the garden path at the end of the lesson, because he taught from his home, where I felt like if somebody were to call me this evening and say, Daniel Barenboim's indisposed, would you come and play it? I would have been able to, such was my complete understanding of that music, from how do I describe it? Not from a pianistic point of view, but from a conceptual, from an artistic, from a creative point of view. And that was the way that Peter taught. So if I hadn't had Stephen first, I don't know that I would have been able to manage what it was that Peter was demanding of me.
Sure.
And then Nina Svetlanova afterwards gave me something actually quite incredible. That was a real schooling in the Russian.
Sure, it must have been quite different from anything you'd had before.
It actually was very different.
I can imagine.
Yes, it was very rich, and very different. So if I look at those three main teachers, I would say each one of them had an invaluable input into my piano playing, and I wouldn't want to separate out any. I wouldn't want to put one ahead of the other. They were all vital to me.
So how did you develop your technique? Were you a study practicer, or were you?
I was a very, very, very keen practicer during my college years. I used to practice a lot, and I was always, because I was started so late, I sort of knew how I did things. I never went through that, what must be wonderful if you're a child, to a talented kid who's got a good teacher and they end up playing, not knowing how they're doing it, not being self-conscious. I never had that. I always was aware of what it was that I was doing. So developing my technique, right, it takes hours and years, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I wouldn't even want to put a cap on it. I wouldn't want to say that I'm still not developing my technique.
Yes, sure.
I think
you keep going with it.
Yes,
But did you start with scales or studies, or did you learn everything in each piece, do you think?
I wasn't from the school of playing which says it comes from loads of exercises.
Right.
But very few. I did a very, very few sort of, those Czerny, Kramer, Clementi things. And I don't use them. I use them very sparsely in my own teaching. I will use them, but I will do it for a very particular reason. I don't believe in sitting there doing hours of finger exercises. No. And the thought of people sitting doing Hanon just, I don't know, it fills me with dread, because they're just perpetuating this myth that we play the piano with our fingers.
Sure.
So I'm just thinking of this as an example. This one.
I do know that, yes.
People are sitting there doing this stuff.
Sure.
But actually that's the biggest problem I face in my teaching, is people who've been
They're not
taught
using
to do that.
their arms properly.
No, and for that exercise I would do this. And even the first ones, if people want, because people seem to think they've got to do some Hanon, it's like they're ablutions.
I just warm up with it. I have
yes, no,
it's useful for that.
It can be, but what I do is things like, instead of doing it in C major, why do it in C major? We need black notes there. You might take them, and I use movements like this, or even crazy things like this, sliding in and out to experience nothing in the arm, nothing in the finger whatsoever.
Yes.
That's the equivalent. I'm not going to do something as crude as a glissando, but it's the equivalent of nothing in the fingers as a glissando would be. Just sliding in, experiencing zero finger, or even this one.
Yeah.
The finger's just there, alive, very alive, but
using everything else.
yes, and I think really when I look back, a very, very important component of my technical education was, apart from the wonderful things I got from all my teachers, was working for a little while with Julian Martin, who introduced me. He's on the faculty of Juilliard. He introduced me to the rotation techniques of Dorothy Talbot, because he was working with her at the time. So that added a huge dimension, the rotation. And he explained it to me, because he's a brilliant mind, and he explained it to me in such an incredibly illuminating way that I find that is absolutely a cornerstone of what I believe about technical training. That it's very hard to let go of this stuff, and we're all taught it, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Now, you won the Mons piano competition.
Yes.
How did this shape and change your career? Do you think it was an important moment, or did it not change? Because people think all different things about competitions, don't they? I just wondered.
I think it's nice to put down on a CV. It looks nice, doesn't it?
That's it,
if you won first prize in something, it's like you just put it down and people say, oh, you won first prize. I mean, I don't know that it did anything much more than that.
No. So do you advise your students to do competitions?
Yes,
do you think that it can help establish a career, or do you think that's something that's obsolete now?
Well, isn't it Justin Bieber who's given us a lesson in how not to go through the normal routes? And he was a YouTube phenomenon. I don't know whether it's I don't think it's quite the same as it used to be. But anything that gives profile and publicity has to be a good thing. But I always tell students, and I've had people that have won, just as I've won some and I've lost some. My students will win and then they'll lose, and I'll say, well, that's just the way it is. That's just life. You're never going to win everything.
Yeah, sure.
So I do think it's probably a good thing to do. I mean, would encourage it if somebody's very ambitious, and I have had those that have done them and done well in them.
Yeah, sure.
And I've had those that have done them, wonderful pianists actually, who haven't won. Then what? Your self-confidence can take a huge knock, I think.
Yes. So which composers are you particularly drawn to? What do you really enjoy playing?
I'm very, very conservative.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean, in terms of repertoire, there's nothing that I find more satisfying than the core classical repertoire from Bach. Actually, even before Bach. I'm going to be playing some Rameau, not that he's before Bach, but sort of high Baroque, even earlier Baroque.
Yes, I noticed on your bio you love doing early Baroque music. I
wouldn't necessarily perform early Baroque.
Okay.
Louis Couperin, I love the music. You can't really do it on the piano, but Francois Couperin, I can't make work on the piano. Some people can. Angela Hewitt does it beautifully, but I can't make it work for me. But Rameau I can make work for me. But it took me a long time to find the sound that I wanted. Okay, so Haydn, love Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin particularly fond of.
Yes.
That sort of mainstream. Schumann, I couldn't live without Schubert. And then, I mean, I don't play a huge amount of Liszt. I played the sonata at one point, and incredible music. It's just temperamentally, it's not really me. And I don't play an awful lot of contemporary music either. So, much as I admire it, it's just, I'd rather be doing other things.
You've performed extensively, as I've said in the introduction, but you really enjoy teaching, don't you? So what is it about teaching that really attracts you? What do you love about it?
Okay, I do love teaching. I love the idea of, I get a creative buzz out of it, so that if I'm working with somebody for an hour, the hour goes like that, and it's something to do with communicating, it's something to do with being in contact with the music, the creativity of being in contact with the music, and of working with somebody to overcome barriers. Illuminating, hopefully. I mean, hopefully that's my job, to illuminate the music, to show somebody how. I see, one of the things I find really important about my teaching is, it's all very well to have an idea of how you want the music to be, but unless you can show somebody how to do that.
Oh yes, that's crucial, isn't it? Yes. You've got to be able to do it yourself, I think, anyway.
Otherwise you could just go and have lessons with a fantastic musician like a violinist.
Yes.
A pianist could do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think you can learn a tremendous amount from working with other musicians. But just the idea that being able to help somebody develop as pianists and as musicians, that's what I love about it.
And so how's your teaching evolved then over your career, really? I think we should mention your wonderful blog, practicingthepiano.com. It's really fantastic. I love dipping into it, and
thank you.
Certainly you've got a great following. So that's obviously helped your career as a teacher. Or
yes, I think that it comes down to. I mean, so often when I get students come, I'll ask them how they're practicing. If they've got a problem with a passage, they think it's technical. Yes. A lot of the time, people will think it's technical. And I'll say, well, how are you practicing? And then I won't get anything much. I mean, they may say, oh, I do it slowly. And I ask them to show me. And it's not slow. It's just not.
That's the thing, isn't it, about playing slow, though? I think you play much faster than you actually think you do.
Yes, and then also when you're practicing slowly, what are you doing? I mean, I always think practicing slowly is preparing us for playing fast. So if we're practicing slowly and making slow movements across the keyboard, you may as well not bother with it. I mean, that will imprint it on your ear to some extent. But to get back to your question, how's my teaching evolved? I think, that's a very difficult one to answer. It certainly has.
Has it changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it has a lot. In that now I would rather infect somebody with a passion for playing that piece, and creatively, not so much talking about how we're moving at the keyboard, but you know, what the poetic content of the music is, what the music means, because it means different things to different people, you know.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing, and I'm not one of these teachers that would ever say, this passage here, this is how it should go. It's got to go like this, and then they copy that. That for me is a killer. So I suppose, you know, talking first about the meaning of the music, the spirit of the music, what that is, and then finding ways of achieving it, of helping people to achieve it.
Sure. Now, we both adjudicated earlier this year out in Hong Kong at the 65th Hong Kong Music Festival. I have to get that title right. And we both had a fantastic time. What do you think is the most important thing about adjudicating, and why do you love it so much? Why are you attracted to it?
Well, I do love it. I think it's one of those highlights of my year when I've got festivals to adjudicate. I've just done the Abingdon Festival, and that's a beautiful festival, because what happens is that the person comes up to play, and then instead of getting a mark, they get a report form, you know, with the comments, but then I get the opportunity to work with them for anywhere between 2 and 10 minutes. So it's an individual little class thing.
That's great, isn't it?
And you can get some magical results out of that very quickly.
Yes.
I think it has to do with supporting somebody in performance. I think you've got to be very kind as an adjudicator, extremely kind, because when you come up to perform, it's the same for us, isn't it? You bare your soul.
You do.
You take your bow, and nobody can see that. Hopefully, you take your bow and you smile and you exude confidence, but actually you really are bearing your soul. And for a child to come up and play, or even an adult to come up and play in a festival, I, as a performing adjudicator, absolutely know what that is, and if they should have nervousness and accidents, that they can be devastated. So really, to give them the opportunity to develop confidence with constructive feedback, honest feedback, you know, constructive feedback. And because I just remember when I was growing up doing my teenage years doing festivals, I remember every little detail about those adjudicators.
Yes.
There was one, I won't mention the name, I think he's passed away now, but he had, what I remember about him was his yellow stained fingertips, because he used to smoke those filterless cigarettes whilst he was working.
It's amazing what you remember, details you remember.
He'd come up and do his adjudicating with a cigarette with yellow. I remember that, and it was a very important, it was a crucial part of my upbringing, actually, to have those performing experiences.
I think it's really important. You can't underestimate festivals. I think that's
it's beautiful
amazing
work, isn't it?
It is.
Really beautiful.
So, what does playing the piano mean to you?
It was a passion from the very early years, even before I had lessons. I can remember sitting there at the piano when I was about this big, thinking, all music can come out of these notes that are sitting in front of me, but I just don't know how to get it out. And I think my journey with the piano has been just that, finding how to get the music out of these 88 keys.
Sure.
So it means I can't really put it into words, because it is passion, and it's everything really, isn't it? It's the core of my life, playing the piano. What it represents to me is not just playing, it's teaching, it's still magic, isn't it?
It is.
And I think this is a magic box.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Graham.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.